Taking an established intellectual property, or IP, and moving it from one medium to the next can be a very challenging endeavor. If you look at very popular movies that try to make video games, you'll see a great example of this. Part of the reason for this is because the designers of those games spend a large part of their budget on the intellectual property license and therefore don't have enough money to design a game that's a very good game. But I'd like to argue that another large part of why those games aren't great games is because they were great movies. You see, when you take an intellectual property and move it from one medium to the next, you have to take into consideration the fact that the medium is different. This is why books that are great stories have to be adjusted to make a great movie. Explosm Entertainment has taken their intellectual property, Cyanide and Happiness, and done great things with it. They have webcomics, they have YouTube videos, they've got plushies and stuffies, and they've got card games, so it makes sense that they would jump into their first video game with Freakpocalypse. Freakpocalypse is a point-and-click adventure where you follow the life of the protagonist, Coop, as he survives high school through bullies and jocks and freaks and geeks and just about every stereotype that you could find in a modern-day high school. The hook here, though, is that this is the universe of Cyanide and Happiness, so things are going to be twisted and morbid, and you're probably going to want to throw up at some point in time, but the whole time you should be laughing. Overall, the game plays like a pretty typical point-and-click adventure. As you interact with your environment, sometimes you can pick new items up, but there are a ton of interactables. Clearly, this game has seen a ton of work. There is so much voiceover work here. It is quite frankly astonishing. Through my time playing this game, I probably ran into nearly 100 different characters, and all of them seem to have at least something to say.
Psst, hey, I heard you could get the hard stuff.
Of course, I've got the strongest markers in town.
Wow, how'd you know I was talking about markers?
I can sniff out a sniffer from a mile away. Hand over the money and this here deep blue jumbo-sized MarkTech marker is all yours.
Oh, I don't have any money. Could you just, give it to me?
Along your way, though, as you're collecting items to solve the various quests that are called chores in this game, you can also merge some of those items together to make more complicated solutions. You can also collect various different costume pieces so you can dress your character up in various different ways as you play through the game. This was a really cool touch, and I did find that there was a number of costumes that not only were they messed up themselves, but nodded to different IPs as well. As far as the mechanics are concerned, though, this is a pretty typical point-and-click adventure. They haven't tried to revolutionize anything. They really haven't added anything to the genre. Their entire hook is the fact that this is the universe of Cyanide and Happiness, and you're playing their sick, twisted game. Or at least that's how it's supposed to execute. At the end of the day, Freakpocalypse is a game that falls on its face far more than it actually delights. And that's really hard for me to say about something created by Cyanide and Happiness, who I have loved everything that they have created up until this point. I think a large part of the problem here has to do with it being on a new medium. In everything else they've done so far, they've had much more control over the timings and all of the animations and just bundling everything perfectly, so when the end user experiences it, it's what they have created. The problem with a video game is that the player is a participant in the creation. Specifically, with a point-and-click game, the player is in that world, and they are part of the story. And much like they're part of the story, they are also part of the delivery of the joke. This appears to be something that the designers just didn't see coming. Players are going to get bored sometimes, and they're going to want to skip through text, and without a controlled environment where the joke can be delivered appropriately, it's just not going to have the same impact. The same thing is true if the player is trying to be very engaged in the world and want to experience everything. A joke may be told, but may be told in a way that's too slow for the player to realize that was a punchline, and because of that, the delivery is all off. A great example of this is that my favorite part of this game was the first 20 minutes, the introduction. And at first I didn't understand why that was true, but when I began to reflect on what I liked and didn't like about this game, I came to realize that it was because the introduction to the game is almost entirely a cartoon.
The only thing flat on this earth will be your face once I'm done with you!
Better get a move on. Your friends will be stupefied by then. Allow me to demonstrate.
Coop, help me, man! Sorry for all the bullying, but you gotta help me out! My favorite color is applesauce.
Oh no!
They got to choose the delivery of all of those jokes, and for that reason, they elicited out loud laughter from me. Once the actual game starts, because this is a point-and-click game, the game slows down significantly. And this brings me to my second major criticism. The world of Freakpocalypse is just not interesting. While I think there is some affinity for the main character, Coop, you do feel bad for him as he's trying to wade through high school. But I found a lot of the other characters, they just didn't seem to be brought out far enough. They rely a lot on stereotypes, which I think in this particular brand of humor is the right course to go, but those stereotypes weren't pushed to their limits in a way that would actually make it funny. As I clicked through this world, wandering around, looking at different objects and collecting different things, I found that my want to know more about the things that were going on around me got less and less over time, which is not what you're supposed to feel with a point-and-click game. You're supposed to be interested in the world. You're supposed to want to know more. You're supposed to want to solve the mystery. But in the end, I just didn't feel that drive with Freakpocalypse. I hate to say it, but I honestly felt like this game was a chore to play. I did not enjoy myself, and it's almost with tragic irony that the quest lines in this game are called chores. Anecdotally, I have to say that this is a very painful review to give. I hate to be critical of something of Cyanide and Happiness, but this game unfortunately didn't execute the way that they wanted it to. It's clearly a monumental effort that they've done here. You can see the sweat that they put into this game. You can see the amount of content that's here. But at the same time, the world ended up being very uninteresting, and the jokes ended up falling flat. And for a Cyanide and Happiness point-and-click game, those things need to work. Unfortunately, they just didn't. If you've liked this video, well then like this video. And if you'd like to find out about more great games that just haven't got enough attention, take a look at my channel where I specialize in finding great indie hidden gems. Thanks for hanging out with me, and until next time, this has been Pixel.